70% of stabbings, and 70% of beatings, and 50% of fights. That's why Islam bans alcohol. What I want to look at this particular aspect here, Islam, law and war. There is probably no other topic hotly debated, discussed, books written on, articles written on, programs are done on it, films are done on it, than Islam and war. What exactly is the Islamic legislative system as pertains to war? Even before September 11th, the popular image of Islam on war has been one of hijackings and terrorism. And this is something that unfortunately has been played out in the popular media for many, many years. It wasn't just September 11th, which was a tragic incident. That was the catalyst for the crystallization of Islam as a violent religion. If you look over the period of history, you'll find many pictures of Muslims depicted cutting the heads of Christians, torturing Christians, and the justification that Islam is a barbaric and violent religion. I'm sure many of you remember the controversy with the Pope some years ago, and his quoting of the Byzantine Empire. Films such as True Lies have continued with this idea that Islam is a warlike religion. And Cid, for those of you who don't know your history, El Cid is the story of Rodrigo Diaz de Povar. There's also the story of another man, named Yusuf ibn Tashfa'in. This film here is a stereotypical idea of Muslims coming in, breaking the land, forcing people to convert to Islam. And unfortunately, these ideas, perpetuating idea, has been prevalent in society for many years. But the one question the popular media and all the people of the West have asked is just exactly what does Islam have to say about war? Has anybody investigated the Qur'an, or the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, or the doings and actions of his disciples? Because if we do, we'll begin to get a clear understanding of just exactly what Islam has to say about war. In reality, much of what the world holds today is human rights and sanctity of life in war was embodied in Islam long before the modern era. And some of the facts I'm going to reveal in this particular aspect of the talk, you'll be surprised to think that Muslims have said this, the Prophet Muhammad has said this, because you've already been given a perspective of an image of what Islam says about war. Even when the image came up on the screen, already you had a thought in your head of what to think. The Qur'an and the sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him are the two sources that Muslims use to war by, and as such, the Muslim actions should be reflective of their legal sources. I remember as a little boy, my grandmother used to teach me the Bible. She said, "We know them by their fruit. Good trees give good fruit. Bad trees give bad fruit." And if we judge Muslims by the actions of a minority today, then we'd say Muslims have got a pretty rotten tree. Without all looking at, is that what Islam actually says? Following the battle of Hunayn, the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him saw a dead woman laying on the ground, to which he said, "The messenger of God commands you not to slay women." It is a prohibition of Islamic law to directly or indirectly kill women and children and non-combatants, or as commonly called today, collateral damage. When the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him died, this tradition of laying down a humanitarian legal system of war was carried on by those who came after him. The early followers of the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him followed in his tradition, but also greatly expounding on his teachings. Abu Bakr was the first of the disciples of the Prophet Muhammad to attain leadership after his death. And in the first battle that took place after the death of the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him, Abu Bakr laid down the legal constraints of war that Muslim soldiers should do. And he said the following: "See that you avoid treachery, do not depart in any way from the right, do not mutilate anyone, you should not kill children, women or old men. Do not injure the date palm, do not burn it, do not cut down any trees where there is food for men and beasts. Do not slay the flocks and herds and camels save for legal sustenance. You might eat of the meat of the men of the land, that they may bring to you their vessels." making mention of the name of God. Do not molest monks in their churches and leave them to themselves. Now march forward in the name of God. Fulfill the mission entrusted to you. May God protect you from sword and pestilence. And one of the things here that we was talking before we came in here is that under an Islamic legal system there is a guarantee for people of a non-Muslim belief to practice their religion. One of the things that Islam cannot do, but unfortunately there have been instances in Islamic tradition where this law has been broken, is there is no compulsion in belief. You cannot force someone to become a Muslim. It is against Islamic law. And if such a person is forced to become Muslim, and this is brought to the attention of the Islamic State, they are given the freedom and liberty to go back to the religion they were practicing previously. Abu Bakr said, just covering certain aspects, do not mutilate anyone, you should not kill children, women, or old men. Now these words were spoken by Abu Bakr 1400 years ago in the 7th century. The Geneva Convention did not outlaw such actions until 1863, the 19th century, with continued updates, the last of which took place in 2006. He said, do not injure the date palm, do not burn it, do not cut down any tree where there is food for men and beasts. Do not slay the fox, herds, and camels, save for legal sustenance. A burnt over policy of war is forbidden in Islam. Once again, this was written down some 1400 years ago. As the weapons of war develop, they are still encapsulated within the Qur'an and the saying of the Prophet Muhammad. So chemical and biological warfare weapons will be banned under an Islamic state. That's not to say that Muslim countries do not use chemical and biological warfare weapons. But to quote Norman Daniel again, just because Muslim societies or Muslim countries have done it, does not necessitate that Islam has it. Further rules of war. No one should be burned alive or tortured with fire. Wounded soldiers who are neither unfit to fight nor actually fighting should not be attacked. Prisoners of war should not be killed. It is prohibited to kill anyone who is tied up or in captivity. Residential areas should not be pillaged, permanently destroyed, nor should the Muslims touch the property of anyone except those fighting against them. Muslims will not take anything from the general public of the conquered country without paying for it. Treaties must not be broken. Muslims are prohibited from opening hostilities without properly declaring war against the enemy unless the adversary has already started aggression against them. So under the Islamic State, Guantanamo Bay would never exist. Bagram Air Base would never exist. Here's the evidence. As I said, the final Geneva Convention was not completed until 1949, some 85 years after it was first penned. On many occasions, the Qur'an was revealed in reaction to events that happened to the Muslims, on what such incident was at the time of the Battle of Uhud. And this particular verse of the Qur'an was revealed, Surah Nahl, verse 125. Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good instruction, and argue with them in the way that's best. Now, many Muslims, when they initially read this particular verse of the Qur'an, they may think it means interfaith dialogue to prove which religion is more superior. It's actually incorrect. According to the revelation that was made, Abu Hassan al-Mas'udi, in his book Reasons and Occasions for the Revelation of the Holy Qur'an, remarks that the preceding verse was revealed to prohibit the Muslims from mutilating the dead of the enemy. The reason being is because at the Battle of Uhud, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad was killed by the Quraysh, and his body was mutilated by them. So in reaction to this, God revealed a verse to the Prophet Muhammad telling him that you should take the moral high ground. Just because they mutilated your dead, it does not necessitate that you mutilate their dead because you are better than them. There are many sayings and doings and stories of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that they themselves reiterated that when they was fighting the Muslims and were taken as prisoners of war, that they actually went to live with the families of the Muslims. The families of the Muslims shared their food with them, went out with them. If they needed something, they bought it for them. They weren't locked in cages for days on end and hours on end. a priority that the Muslims put their prisoners of war before themselves. That they should see to it that their prisoners of war were fed before themselves. Despite such clear rules of war, Islam and any ideology can be misinterpreted by its followers. But like the actors of the IRA, should we label all Roman Catholics and Christians as terrorists? Of course we should. The actions of the minority does not govern the majority. Neither does any Islamic movement proclaiming Islam mean that is enshrinement of Islam.